I believe, Independence Blue Cross's largest fully insured client. All right, so that's something that you want to keep in mind. That's the reason that Pays Boa really kind of is able to beat its chest when Cross is building to talk to their underwriters, is because we have that clout of being its largest fully insured clients. All right, we had a great year in 2014, and it was incredibly historic. The first bullet was the fact that the renewal came in where it came in, I think under a lot of people's expectations for budgetary reasons. That allowed for a relatively calm open enrollment season. Now, I put calm in air quotes because while you may not have made plan changes or any type of material impacts to your overall structures, everybody got a new ID card. All the bills went to Business Solver. We had to process all of that paperwork much more in advance than we usually did. So it was a huge undertaking. I couldn't even imagine what would have happened if you had to make plan changes on top of all that. It would have just been exponentially that much more difficult. But considering the fact that we did go through all of that tumult, bills were paid, ID cards did show up on time, relatively, for most, for like 99% of you. There are some I'm looking at there, or I'm actually avoiding eye contact with. But we feel, now that we're out of it and we can look back and breathe, that it was successful. So I want to thank you for your patience and understanding, and we appreciate all the help from Andy and from Magda from the IBC side. I also just want to call attention to Katie back there from our office, Katie Sillip. We have Jackie Jim Gochin, we have Andrew Doyle, we have Matt Doyle, all of whom just poured through reams of paper to process all of these changes, and then QA'd, and then QA'd the QA, and then if you could do it the third time, they did. Just to make sure that ID cards did get out in time, that bills were accurate, and that people were where they were supposed to be for the November 1 open enrollment success date. So thank you. All right. Moving forward into 2015, this is the billing calendar structure that we followed for the first 3 months. I know you cannot see this, which is why we're sending it out as a standalone piece tomorrow. And what we'll show you is the 2015 billing calendar, wherein we will show each section of trial invoices and when they'll appear, when the final invoice will post on Business Solver, and then when the ACH will actually occur. So if you go back to this page, this key, which is hieroglyphics, this is how we have been conducting ourselves over the past 3 months. So you have been getting the notification from us via email saying that trial invoices are now up for your review. Please take a look. If anything is askance, let us know, and we'll go in and make that adjustment for you. And then we are also then notifying that the ACH pull is going to happen on X date. All right. So in the first month, we pushed that back a little bit because we wanted to make sure that we had everything tied off and that it was neat and clean and correctly done. And then we all held our collective breath, and it worked. It was astonishing. Even the bank. Are there anybody from Bryn Mawr here? They're not, but we asked them to join us if they wanted to. Even they were astonished. They said, I can't believe it. We're sitting on top of all this money. We can pay the carriers. It was a hallelujah moment.
So wait 1 second. You'll notice when you look at these 3 months, this is October, November, December, all you have to notice about is the lack of a pattern. There is a pattern built in there because what should have happened on every Tuesday in a month wound up happening on random days. Christmas was the Thanksgiving period was difficult. The Christmas period was difficult. John, when you flip to the next. Okay, we made a big effort as we move forward into the first 3 quarters of last year to make things happen not on the same day. Okay, it's never going to occur on the same day. We try to make things as much as possible happen on the same day so that your HR office and your finance office, or you guys most of the you want to work in the business office, and have some predictable expectations about when the money is going to have to be in your account. So far, this has worked particularly well. The only problems that we had in the first month or two were miscommunication between the HR office and the finance office. And any short pay was cleared up in less than 24 hours. So all the people had was so-and-so going to pay their bill, so-and-so going to pay their bill, who's going to pay it if they didn't pay it. All that has proved to be an unnecessary worry. In any case, we built enough slack into the system to help the Business Solver agency and Bryn Mawr Trust, which has been a really wonderful partner. But we built enough slack in the system, so we should never have to worry about those kinds of stuff. It's time to pick it up and So I think the experience we had in the first couple months is this experience. So IDC has never been paid so well, right? And so quickly. Even though we don't pay on the first necessarily, we would pay the first day of the month that can. They're getting their money on average a whole lot faster than they did when they were billing schools. So the system that business software set up for us, with heavy boots on the ground work by EPC, has all come together. And when you think about the number of pieces of information that could have been wrong, some of which were wrong, they got ironed out before it really cost anybody a problem. And I really want to be extremely thankful to the folks that have done that, because it was a labor of love.
Labor of love.
Paid for it too. Yeah.
Labor of love. My favorite story was the school that just contacted me at the end of last week and said, you know, we haven't paid our bill in 2 months. And I said, you have. You just didn't notice that we've ACH'd your account for 2 months straight. So you might want to check your books. So that wasn't anybody in there. All right. So when we look forward into 2015, now that we have this nice TPA back-end system assisting us, you know, with our enrollment and with our billing, you want to start to think philosophically what you are going to perhaps encounter, you know, in terms of designing plans and designing structures for the next open enrollment period. So these are just a couple of things that we see out on the horizon. High deductible plans are becoming ever more popular. And actually, certain employers are putting that in as their cornerstone plan, saying that this is what we're going to offer as our number one plan, and everything else after that you're going to pay the pass-through on. And there's a lot of rationale behind that. It's affordable. It engages in consumerism. It is built on that PPO model, and it also allows for the health savings account. So a lot of people have been very interested in that. We'll touch on that a little bit. Dependent coverage is something that people have been taking a lot of looks at, because with the dependent coverage, there's this interesting conversation in benefits as to what the employer's responsibilities really are. Am I supposed to cover the entire family, or am I supposed to simply just cover the employee? And so there's been, not just in the private sector, but in schools as well, some conversations about, is there opportunities to shed dependents, and if so, how does that look and feel? Not well is how it feels, by the way. How it looks, that's a different opinion. And then the cost shift to the employees. This is just something that we're all facing as we get into higher healthcare plan costs. At what point do we then shift all of that through where the school, the employer, reaches a break point and says, at this point from here on out, we need to pass those costs through to the employees as opposed to absorption on a continual basis. One thing that we do not see is that employers are not dumping coverage. So this was conjecture about the ACA, that once the exchange is open, that a lot of employers might say, I'll take the penalty. I'll have no problem paying the penalty because it was such a small piece compared to the actual health care bill. So people were wondering, are we going to just dump coverage altogether? That's not been happening, and there isn't really any kind of evidence out there to suggest it's going to happen. This is from an article that was in the Washington Post, and there isn't any evidence to suggest that that's happening at this point. All right? The ACA, our friend, which we'll talk about a little bit towards the end of this conversation, will continue to have a cost impact on things. You know, make no bones about that. It wasn't a one-off. You're going to continue to feel the brunt of this, and we'll see it in next year's renewal, and the renewal after that, and the renewal after that, regardless of what the Congress does. Pinch. So we have these three fees to look forward to in next year's renewal. The health insurance fee started out in year one at $8 billion, and indexes up to 11.3. Corey fee started out at $1 PEPM per employer. That drops, goes to $2 PEPM. And then the reinsurance actually did decrease. So that's going to be the one number which comes down, but the other numbers are going to index up. And that is going to have an impact of, in this past renewal, it was worth 3 and I think 0.5% to the overall. This is an unavoidable type of burden that all employers are feeling out there. We just want to apprise people of it. In terms of trend for 2015, because this is a question which comes up to us continuously, we don't get past November 4th and when a school calls and says, what's the renewal going to look like for next year? And we're well aware that that's a cost concern you need to build into your budgets. These are the trends that we have from major prognosticators out there. So you have Aon, Pricewaterhouse, Buck, Towers, Siegel, and Mercer. And you can very easily Google their trend reports, and they put them out for 2015, and they'll say that this is what they're seeing as the healthcare inflationary rate. And you can see it's all over the map. So you have Aon at 5.5 and Towers at 5.2, but then you have Buck at 8.6 and Siegel at 8.4. And so there's this question as to why the variance and how come there isn't any type of consistency amongst those numbers. Well, it has to do with where they're pulling the data from, the lines of coverage that they're pulling the data from. So if they're pulling it from the entire continent of the United States, that number can come down because they don't have high-cost centers like the Northeast sector, which is driving costs up. So it depends on how they cut that data. What we do is we'll look at Blue Cross and we'll say, what is the Blue Cross trend that they have in their renewals? And the trend that they have for medical inflation runs between 8 to 12%. So the question which is always asked is, what should we book? And we say that you, at this point, should book 8 to 12%. We know that that's a 4-point corridor in there. But at this time, with no claims to really review and analyze to project forward, we just have to use that safe kind of heavy bet and pray for the best. Okay? One thing that I am fascinated by is this. So this is really in the weeds, but it's called Specialty RX. And I can tell you right now that if you come back to this conversation next year and the year following, this will drive the conversation. So Specialty RX is Phil Mickelson for an golf tournament with a commercial for his specialty medication, Humira. Where's it in? It's one for rheumatoid arthritis. One of those two. Okay. So Humira for rheumatoid arthritis costs on average $3,000 a script for a 30-day supply. This space for Specialty RX is balloon, and by 2020 you're looking at a 109% increase from where we're standing in 2016. So if you look at Pays Boa as a whole, this is your numbers. Specialty drug was 1.1% of usage. Okay, so if you look at the first circle, if you can read that, Pays Boa filled 266,000 scripts amongst all of its membership. Of that amount, 3,086 were for what they call specialty. Okay, but here's the cost. The total cost for all of those drugs was $24 million. And for the specialty space, which was 1% of the people, okay, it was $6.8 million. So 1% is attributable for 28% of net spend. It's astonishing. And some of that, when I get into the weeds of what these drugs actually are, it will literally be one person at a particular school who has Hep C. It'll be someone who has HIV. It'll be someone who's taking Copaxone, rheumatoid arthritis. And there isn't really any way to duck or dive. And these drugs are life-altering in that they're allowing these people to continue with productive lives even though they're suffering from a debilitative disease. The problem is that the cost is just going to continue to climb. So I met with an individual last week who works in this space, and he told me this fascinating statistic. Next year, there will be a statin-lowering medication that's released into the market. So you think about Crestor and Lipitor, those drugs that you take for cholesterol. Well, right now you take that pill, and a Crestor costs you $300. You can take the generic, that costs you $5, and it's going to reduce your cholesterol by about 50%. So they're going to introduce one to the market next year, which will reduce cholesterol 90%. So it's that much more effective. It costs $3,000. So you'll get better outcomes, but your corresponding costs are going to explode. And right now, where we're looking at specialty drug, 1% constituting 28% of our spend. Next year, it's anticipated to be 35 to 40, and the years following will be 50, 60, 70. It will sink the entire ship. So that's specialty injectable. And that is what we're looking at on the horizon. So what we wanted to talk about before we shift into the actual data of migration, et cetera, is what we're looking at for initiatives in 2015 for Pays Boa to examine.
Yeah, so think about this as the big game, the long-term game. In the end, we're only going to be able to control our premium costs if we're controlling the costs that are coming into us, and if we're using the best of the market to do that. So so you can think of these things as initiatives. In some cases, they're research studies. These are questions that the trustees and the other committees will be looking at to figure out what our long-term move should be. So of course, we'll be re-engaging with Aetna. Aetna made an effort to compete last year. I think probably they'll make a stronger effort this year. And it's important for us, now that we're paying in one big check, it's important for us to look at the market because more people are going to be willing to, now that we have this structure in place, for actually managing 143 schools as if they were almost one employer. The interest of the market in our business is much higher. Second, we'll be going to the market on both dental insurance and on life and LTD. While those aren't our biggest programs, it's nonetheless important to know what the market is there. As a kind of longer term question, but one that's being asked increasingly at schools and by insurers in general is there an advantage to us as a group doing self-insurance? Now that's a complicated